Hello everyone, I am Dr. Ajit Kumar Khilnani from the Department of ENT, Gujarat Adani Institute of Medical Sciences, Bhuj. I welcome you all to this online session today, and the topic for my discussion today will be chronic suppurative otitis media. The reason for choosing this topic is that it is a very common pathology, ear pathology with which the patients come to ENT OPD. And as far as from exam point of view, it is very frequently asked questions in your exam, and most of you will be getting a case of ear of a CSOM in your practical examination also. So the objectives of my today's session are that all of you should be able to define what is chronic suppurative otitis media, what is the classification of CSOM, and to know the etiology, the clinical features, and the management of chronic suppurative otitis media. So by definition, chronic suppurative otitis media, it is a long-standing infection of a part or whole of the middle ear cleft, which is characterized by ear discharge and a permanent perforation. So in the definition, we see there is a term middle ear cleft. So middle ear cleft is somewhat different from middle ear. Then the next slide, I'll tell you what is middle ear cleft. And there's one term permanent perforation. So a perforation is called permanent when the margins of the perforation are epithelialized and it does not heal by itself. Then it is called a permanent perforation. And this CSOM, it is more common, more prevalent in poor countries with low socioeconomic standards and poor nutrition. And it is also very common pathology in our country also. And this disease affects both sex groups and all age groups. So there is no particular age or gender in which it is seen more commonly. It can affect any gender and at any age. So this is a figure of a middle ear cleft. So middle ear cleft includes middle ear, it includes the attic region or the epitympanum, it includes the editus, it includes the antrum and the mastoid air cells along with the eustachian tube. So this whole area region is called middle ear cleft. When we say middle ear, it is only a part of the middle ear cleft. But when we include attic, editus, antrum, mastoid ear cells and eustachian tube, then it is called a middle ear cleft. An infection of a part or whole of the middle ear cleft, a chronic infection, it is called chronic suppurative otitis media. Now the types of the chronic suppurative otitis media, initially we used to say that there are two types, tubotympanic disease and atticoantral disease. But nowadays the recent classification says that CSOM can be divided into two, mucosal disease or a squamosal disease. So the mucosal disease is same as our traditional tubotympanic disease, which is also safe or a benign disease. The squamosal disease is like our traditional atticoantral disease, and it is unsafe or dangerous. It is dangerous because it has more chances of complications. So that we'll see later on. Now this mucosal disease is further divided into three types. It can be active mucosal. Active mucosal means there's a central perforation and it is active. That is, it is discharging. So a wet perforation. Then it can be inactive mucosal disease in which a perforation is there but at present there is no infection, so it is a dry perforation. Or it can be a healed mucosal disease in which uh, the patient might be having a perforation but the healing process has occurred naturally. So now it is like adhesive otitis media in which there is negative pressure in the middle ear, so the tympanic membrane is adhered to the promontory. Then squamosal disease is also divided into two types, active and inactive. Active squamosal means that there is active infection and, for example, cholesteatoma. And inactive squamosal means at present there is no active infection but the disease can progress to cholesteatoma. So we can say that retraction pocket in which the posterior superior quadrant of the tympanic membrane, it is retracted medially to form a retraction pocket. So this is an example of inactive squamosal disease. So the classification of CSOM is mucosal disease or squamosal disease. So the tubotympanic CSOM, it is associated with anterior inferior part of the middle ear cleft. The term tubotympanic itself suggests that it is a disease in the middle ear which is secondary to the pathology in the eustachian tube. So eustachian tube opens in the anterior wall of the middle ear, and that is why the region of the near the eustachian tube and mesotympanum, it is most commonly affected in tubotympanic type of CSOM, that is anterior inferior part of the middle ear cleft. Now etiology. So infection into the middle ear can go from outside or it can go from inside. So from outside, it is a result of the recurrent attacks of the acute otitis media following exanthematous fever like measles, scarlet fever in childhood. So because of these recurrent attacks, there is a perforation, and because of the perforation, the middle ear is exposed to the environment. So any infection from outside can enter into the middle ear. Another pathology is that if there is any pathology inside like tonsillitis, adenoiditis or sinusitis, rhinitis, then that infection also can enter the middle ear through the eustachian tube. The third etiology is that if the patient is allergic to milk or eggs or fish, then the middle ear in these cases acts as a shock organ and it starts discharging. So because of any of these reasons, the patient can have a discharging ear with a permanent perforation. Now, pathology of the tubotympanic CSOM. Uh, in this, we'll see that how does it affect the middle ear, the different parts of the middle ear. So first is the tympanic membrane. Now, in tympanic membrane, there is a perforation, and this perforation is in the pars tensa region of the tympanic membrane. We know that tympanic membrane has two regions. One is the pars flaccida, which is upper part, and the lower part is called pars tensa. So the perforation involves the pars tensa region, and it is central perforation. Central perforation means the perforation is surrounded by the remnants of the tympanic membrane from all sides. So again, this we'll see in the subsequent slides, and the size and the position of the perforation can vary. So how to describe a perforation? I'll tell you in the subsequent slides. Then middle ear mucosa, it can be normal if the patient is presenting in inactive stage, that when there is no discharge, or the middle ear mucosa can be edematous, and it can be red and velvety, that is congested, if the patient comes during active discharge. Sometimes a polyp can be seen coming from the middle ear, and most of the times this polyp is pale in color in tubotympanic type of CSOM. Then the ossicular chain can be intact and mobile, but it can be necrosed also. And the long process of incus, it is the most common part of the ossicle to be necrosed. The reason is that it is having very limited blood supply, so it gets infected easily and it gets necrosed. Then there can be tympanosclerosis, in which white chalky deposits are seen over the tympanic membrane, and they are because of the hyalinization and subsequent calcification of the middle fibrous layer of the tympanic membrane. So this type of picture can also be seen. Then there can be fibrosis and adhesions seen in the middle ear. Now the clinical features of tubotympanic type of CSOM. The common bacteria which are involved in this, they are Pseudomonas aeruginosa, then Proteus, E. coli and Staph aureus. And the most common symptom with which the patients of CSOM tubotympanic type come to ENT OPD, it is the ear discharge. And the characteristic of ear discharge is that it is non-offensive, that is non-foul smelling. Then it is mucoid or mucopurulent. Now we know that mucus glands, they are present only in the middle ear. So if the patient is coming with serous discharge, then we should think that there is some pathology in the external ear, because mucus glands are not present in the external ear. However, if the discharge is mucoid, then there is some pathology of the middle ear. The discharge can be constant or it can be intermittent, and it appears at the time of upper respiratory tract infection or when the water enters into the middle ear. So during an attack of URTI, the discharge comes, and after the attack subsides, the disease becomes inactive. Another common symptom is hearing loss. Hearing loss in tubotympanic type of CSOM is mostly of conductive type, and because there is limited or no ossicular destruction, the hearing loss rarely exceeds 50 decibels. But sometimes the patient may say that the hearing is better during the presence of the discharge than when the ear is dry. So the reason can be when the ear is dry, the sound reaches the oval window and the round window through a perforation at the same time. So there is no phase difference between the two windows. That is why the patient complains of hearing loss. But when there is discharge, the sound preferably reaches the oval window, because now the discharge, it shields the round window, it protects the round window, and the sound waves, they preferentially reach the oval window. So because of this round window shielding effect, the patient may sometimes say that they hear better when there is presence of discharge. Then perforation, as I already told you that perforation is always central in tubotympanic type of CSOM, and the middle ear mucosa also, it can be pale or it can be red in edematous. Now, now I'll tell you how do we describe a perforation in the tympanic membrane. There are various characteristics of a perforation. Now, this is a figure of a right tympanic membrane in which different parts are seen, and by the two red lines that can be seen, tympanic membrane is divided into four quadrants. Now, these are imaginary or virtual lines, and these are used to describe the pathology in the tympanic membrane. They are not actually present over the tympanic membrane. So the first line, it runs along the long axis of the handle of Malleus, and the second line, it bifurcates the first line at 90 degrees at the level of umbo. Now umbo is the lowermost part of the handle of Malleus, which is a point of maximum retraction of the tympanic membrane. So these two lines, they divide the tympanic membrane into four quadrants: anterior superior quadrant, anterior inferior quadrant, posterior superior quadrant, and posterior inferior quadrant. Now, this is important because when we describe a perforation, we describe with respect to these quadrants. So, following are the characteristics of a perforation: type, number, size, margin, and shape. So, we'll see each characteristic one by one. How do we describe a perforation? So, perforation can be of these three types. It can be a central perforation, it can be a marginal perforation, or it can be attic perforation. A central perforation is one which is found in the pars tensa, and it is surrounded all around by the tympanic membrane, and it is seen in tubotympanic type of CSOM. So the figure here, the black color perforation is seen. It is a central perforation because the tympanic membrane is present on all around it, and it is in the pars tensa region. So the part of the tympanic membrane which is above the malleolar folds, it is called pars flaccida, and below that is pars tensa. So this is an example of a central perforation. Second type was marginal perforation. Now here we can see that this perforation is not surrounded by tympanic membrane on all sides. Some part of its margin, it is formed by the annulus. So annulus forms some part of its boundary, and this type of perforation is generally associated with secondary acquired cholesteatoma. So in the subsequent slides, when we see the classification of cholesteatoma, we'll see what is secondary acquired. But here we can see that this is a example of a marginal perforation. It is not a central perforation. And third type of perforation, it is attic perforation. Attic perforation is one which is situated in the pars flaccida region, which is also called attic region. And this type of perforation is associated with primary acquired cholesteatoma. So here we can see that the black colored perforation, it is present in the upper part of the tympanic membrane, which is pars flaccida region. So this type of perforation is called attic perforation. The second characteristic of a perforation is the number of perforations. Now, usually when we do the otoscopic examination, there is a single perforation. However, if there are multiple perforations, two or three, then we should suspect tuberculous otitis media. So again, it becomes your neat question that multiple perforations in the tympanic membrane can be seen in. So the answer will be tuberculous otitis media. Now in this figure, we can see that it is an endoscopic picture of the tympanic membrane in which two perforations are seen. And these two, there is a thin rim of tympanic membrane between these two perforations. But ultimately what will happen? These two will combine to form a single perforation. Okay, so multiple perforations can be seen in tuberculous otitis media. Another characteristic is the size of the tympanic membrane. Size of the tympanic membrane perforation. Now, according to the size, the tympanic membrane perforation can be divided into small, moderate, large, subtotal, and total. Now, this size We cannot exactly measure the size by any instrument, but this is just a clinical assessment of the size, and it is based on the number of the quadrants involved. So if the perforation involves only one quadrant, we say it is of small size. If it involves two quadrants, we say it is of moderate size. If it involves more than two, we say it is large. If it involves whole of the tympanic membrane but only annulus is present, so annulus is not diseased, then we say it is a subtotal. And if annulus is also destroyed, then we say it is a total perforation. So we'll see each perforation one by one in the subsequent slides. So this is an example of a small perforation. Here we can see that there is a small perforation involving only one quadrant. Here it is anterior inferior quadrant. This is a moderate perforation where two quadrants are involved here, anterior inferior and posterior inferior. So this is a moderate perforation. This is a subtotal perforation. Here we can see that most of the pars tensa is destroyed. Only the annulus is there. So this is a subtotal perforation. This is a total perforation. Here we can see that even annulus is destroyed. So this is the classification of perforation according to the size of the perforation. Next characteristic is the margin. Now in CSOM, mostly the margins of the perforation are smooth, as can be seen in this figure. However, if the margins are ragged or irregular, then we should suspect that it is a traumatic perforation. That trauma can be because of any reason. If the person has been beaten by some other person or accidentally some injury has occurred over the ear, then it leads to a traumatic perforation. So in the lower figure, we see that the small perforation is seen in the anterior inferior quadrant, and the margins are not smooth as compared to the upper figure. In the lower figure, the margins are very ragged and they are irregular, so they can be seen in traumatic perforation. Then shape of the perforation. Mostly the perforation, it is of a round shape, that is circular, or it can be of oval shaped. In the first figure we can see that. In the second figure, when two small oval or circular shaped perforations, they sometimes join or coalesce, they can form a kidney shaped perforation. Or in the previous figure we saw that the shape of the perforation can be irregular if it is traumatic in nature. So by these five characteristics, that is type of perforation, number of perforation, size of perforation, margin of perforation, and shape of perforation, we describe the perforation. Now investigations for tubotympanic type of CSOM. The most important investigation is examination under microscope. So whenever we diagnose a patient of CSOM, we always do an endoscope or microscopic or endoscopic examination, and we see the further details of the condition of the middle ear, the condition of the ossicles. Sometimes the discharge cannot be seen on otoscopic examination, but it is present in the middle ear, so it can be appreciated on microscopic examination. Then audiometry test is done, that is a pure tone audiogram is done to document the type and the degree of the hearing loss, so that we can compare it with post-operative hearing loss, how much patient has improved. Then the culture sensitivity of the ear discharge is sent, so that appropriate antibiotics can be started according to the CS culture sensitivity report. And X-ray Schuller's view, that is X-ray mastoid, and sometimes CT scan of the mastoid may be required to know whether there is any bone destruction or not, and what is the condition of the mastoid hair cells, whether they are pneumatized, whether they are sclerosed, or if there is any low-lying dura or any forward-lying sinus. So these details can better be seen on the CT scan of mastoid. However, in tubotympanic type of CSOM, most of the times there is no bone destruction. Treatment. Now, treatment of any ear pathology, the primary aim should be to eliminate the disease, and the secondary aim is to correct the hearing loss. So for tubotympanic type of CSOM, initially what we do, we clean the ear, that is called oral toileting. Now that can be done either by dry mopping with a cotton swab or with a suction clearance, that can be done under microscope. Then topical antibiotics in the form of eardrops are given, like neomycin, polymyxin, gentamicin, chloromycetin, and then if required systemic antibiotics are also given. So the initial management of tubotympanic type of CSOM is medical management. Then we also instruct the patients to avoid the water entry into the ear and avoid hard nose blowing, because when the patient will blow the nose hard, then whatever infection is there, it can ascend into the middle ear through the eustachian tube. So that is avoided. And if we are able to find any contributory factors like tonsillitis, adenoiditis, if there is DNS or if there is sinusitis, then that should be treated first. Then after that, ear definitive surgical management should be done. But initially, all the contributory factors should be treated first. And finally, once the ear is dry, the perforation is dry, and there is no contributory factors, then we can surgically manage by removing of the polyps. So we saw that there are pale polyps in CSOM of tubotympanic type, and these polyps should not be avulsed. Rather, they should be cut sharply at the base, because we do not know the origin of these polyps. These polyps, maybe they arise from the facial canal or maybe from the region of the stapes. So if we blindly avulse the polyp, it can lead to sometimes post-operative facial paralysis. So that is why they should be cut sharply at the base. If there are any granulations, they should be removed. And the surgery for tubotympanic type of CSOM will be either myringoplasty or tympanoplasty. So myringoplasty means it is only the repair of the tympanic membrane, and tympanoplasty means it is repair of the tympanic membrane along with the repair of the ossicular chain. So repair of ossicular chain is called ossiculoplasty. So myringoplasty plus ossiculoplasty is equal to tympanoplasty. Now, Woolstein proposed a classification of tympanoplasty in which he divided tympanoplasties into 5 types. So here we can see that type 1 tympanoplasty, we can say it is similar to myringoplasty. That is, the ossicular chain is intact. So only the repair of the tympanic membrane is done by putting a graft material. Now, the commonly used graft materials for tympanoplasty is the temporalis fascia graft, because it is easily available from the same site of incision. The thickness of the temporalis fascia corresponds to the normal thickness of the tympanic membrane, that is around 0.1 mm. So postoperative hearing results are better. And third, that it has a very low BMR, basal metabolic rate. So chances of its survival are more as compared to other graft materials. That is why temporalis fascia is the most preferred graft material. Other graft materials can be used are fascia lata, it can be tragal cartilage or perichondrium, fat also, loose areolar fat, or sometimes skin also. But however, temporalis fascia is the most common graft material used. So type 1 tympanoplasty, it is similar to myringoplasty. We only repair the tympanic membrane, the ossicular chain is normal. Then type 2. Here the ossicular chain is functional, but it is partially necrosed. So here also we only keep the graft material, that is a temporalis fascia graft, over the partially eroded ossicular chain because it is functional. So that is called type 2. Then type 3. Here the malleus is absent and incus is absent because of the disease. So only stapes is present. So the graft is kept over the superstructure or head of the stapes. That is called type 3. Also, myringostepidopexy. Myringo means related to tympanic membrane, and stapidopexy. So, tympanic membrane is directly over the stapes now. Myringostepidopexy. Then type 4. Here, even the superstructure of the stapes is absent. So, only foot plate is present. So, graft is kept over that foot plate. So, that is called type 4, also called round window shielding effect, because we are protecting the round window and we are exteriorizing the oval window so that the sound preferentially reaches the oval window and there is a phase difference between the two windows. Then type 5, it is called fenestration operation, in which the footplate is present but it is fixed. So there is no point in keeping the graft over that footplate. So another opening is created in the horizontal semicircular canal, and then it does the work of the role of the oval window. So that is called type 4 or fenestration operation. So this classification was proposed by Woolstein, and it divides the tympanoplasty into 5 types. So that was about the chronic superior otitis media of tubotympanic or mucosal type. Now we move on to the next part of this session, that is etiquantral type of CSOM, what is nowadays called squamosal type of CSOM. Attequental type of CSOM involves the posterior superior part of the middle ear cleft. That is attic, antrum, the mastoidea cells, and the posterior tympanum. So if you remember the previous figure that I showed you of the middle ear cleft, then if the anterior inferior part is the area around the eustachian tube, and the posterior part of that cleft, it includes attic, it includes antrum, the mastoidea cells. So if posterior superior part is involved, and then it is attequental disease. Now this attequental disease has a bone eroding property, and so the chances of complications are more with attequental type of CSOM, and hence it is also called unsafe type of CSOM or dangerous type of CSOM. While tubotympanic type was safe or benign, this is unsafe or dangerous. So we'll see how does it erode the bone. We'll see the pathology also. Now again, the attequental type of CSOM can manifest as different forms. The most common is the cholesteatoma, which we'll see in the detail in the subsequent slides. Then it can also involve the temporal bone, in which it can cause osteitis and the granulation tissues, and also polyps. So here the polyps are of red and fleshy type because they are vascular. In tubotympanic we saw they were pale polyps. Then there is ossicular necrosis here. So the hearing loss is more than the tubotympanic disease. There the ossicular necrosis was limited, but here because of the bone destroying property of the cholesteatoma, there is more ossicular necrosis, and therefore the hearing loss is more as compared to the tubotympanic disease. However, sometimes what happens that cholesteatoma, it acts as a conductive medium. So in spite of the presence of cholesteatoma, the patient sometimes hears better, and such type of patients are called cholesteatoma hearers. Then there can be cholesterol granuloma, which is actually a reaction to the long-standing secretions. So a mass of granulation tissue with foreign body giant cells surrounding the cholesterol crystals are formed. So CSOM of attequental variety can manifest as cholesterol granuloma also. Now cholesteatoma. So cholesteatoma, now the suffix is oma. So we may think that it is a tumor, but actually it's a misnomer. It is not any benign or malignant tumor, and most of the times it is not even made of cholesteatoma. So it is a total misnomer. In layman term, if we say it is a skin in the wrong place, or proper definition is that it is the presence of keratinizing squamous epithelium in the middle ear cleft. Now, if we see the histology of the lining of the middle ear cleft mucosa, then nowhere there is keratinizing squamous epithelium. But if because of any reason this epithelium gains entry into the middle ear, so what are those theories which we'll see later? If keratinizing squamous epithelium enters into the middle ear, it forms cholesteatoma. The some other terms are used for cholesteatoma. They can be epidermosis or keratoma. Now this is the structure of cholesteatoma, which consists basically of two parts. There is a central mass which is of keratin mass, and there is a peripheral mass which is called matrix, which is made up of stratified squamous epithelium. Now this whole, it lies over the bone, and in between there is a thin layer of fibrous stroma. So if we see the histological figure of a picture of cholesteatoma, it will be something like this. Now types of cholesteatomas. Cholesteatomas can be divided into congenital if it is present since birth, or acquired if it is acquired later in life. And acquired is further divided into primary acquired and secondary acquired. So congenital cholesteatoma, it arises from the embryonic epidermal cell rest in the middle ear cleft. So during the development of the middle ear, sometimes there is a bunch of cells, epidermal cells, which remain in the middle ear, which can proliferate after birth to form congenital cholesteatoma. The common sites of occurrence of congenital cholesteatoma, they are the middle ear, the petrous apex, and the cerebellopontine angle. So again, this is an important need question. These are the common sites for development of congenital cholesteatoma. The patients, the children, they are brought, the parents bring them, and they complain of decreased hearing. So on otoscopic examination, a white mass is present behind the intact tympanic membrane, and the patient complains of hearing loss. which on examination we find that it is a conductive hearing loss. So this is again an endoscopic picture. Here we can see that the tympanic membrane is intact. However, a white mass is seen behind the tympanic membrane, and in this case it is seen in the posterior superior quadrant. So this is a picture of a congenital cholesteatoma. The acquired cholesteatoma, it is divided into primary and secondary. So the primary acquired cholesteatoma is one in which there is no previous history of any ear pathology like otitis media or perforation. And there are three theories which explain the formation of primary acquired cholesteatoma. So one is Whitmack's theory, which says that initially there is formation of retraction pocket, which are initially shallow, that they can develop into a deep retraction pocket. So there is collection of epithelial debris, keratin mass, and ultimately it leads to the formation of cholesteatoma. Second is the Rudy's theory, which says that the basal cell layer of the tympanic membrane, it can undergo hyperplasia. So that leads to the development of keratin mass in the middle ear. Or the Sadde's theory, in which there is metaplasia of the mucosa of the middle ear, and that can be because of any repeated infections. So these three theories, they explain the occurrence of primary acquired cholesteatoma. Then secondary acquired cholesteatoma means there is already a pre-existing pathology like a perforation through which the outer epithelium migrates inside the middle ear. So that is Haberman's theory, in which there is epithelial invasion or migration through a pre-existing perforation. Or even Sadde's theory can explain secondary acquired cholesteatoma, that is metaplasia due to the repeated infections. So we know that there are three types of cholesteatomas and five theories. So congenital cholesteatoma can be explained by the presence of congenital cell rest. Then primary acquired cholesteatoma can be explained by Whitmack's theory, by Rudy's theory, by Sadde's theory. And secondary acquired cholesteatoma can be explained by Haberman's theory and Sadde's theory. So these five theories, they explain how these three types of cholesteatomas form. Now the clinical features of atiquental type of CSOM will be the bacteriology will be almost similar as we saw earlier, that is Pseudomonas, E. coli, Staph aureus. And here also there will be the presenting complaint. Most of the times it is ear discharge. However, there are some differences between ear discharge of atiquental disease and tubotympanic disease. Here the ear discharge will be scanty. Scanty means that the ear discharge will not come out from the ear. However, when the patient cleans the ear, or when the examiner or the doctor cleans the ear bud gets stained with the discharge. So that is called scanty discharge. It is foul smelling. Now it is a very typical and characteristic feature of atiquental type of disease. The foul smelling discharge is because the cholesteatoma has the bone destroying property. And how it destroys the bone? It is with these enzymes: collagenases, acid phosphatases, and proteolytic enzymes. Now these enzymes, they are secreted by the osteoclast and the mononuclear inflammatory cells. They destroy the bone, so there is bone necrosis and there is foul smelling ear discharge. Now in tubotympanic disease, generally there is non-foul smelling, but if there is any associated bacterial infection, then there also can be a foul smelling discharge. But here, typically the discharge is always foul smelling. Then hearing loss, here it is more as compared to tubotympanic disease, and again mostly it is of conductive type. However, if the cholesteatoma also involves the inner ear, then some sensorineural hearing loss can also be seen. Then the patient may also complain of bleeding. That bleeding is because of the granulations, and here there are red vascular granulations and polyps. So this is also one of the complaints, bleeding. Then on otoscopic examination, we see a perforation which is either attic or a marginal perforation. So in the types of perforation, we saw what was attic, which was present in pars flaccida, and what was marginal. So here the perforation can be either attic or marginal. In tubotympanic, we saw it was always central. Then there we can see the retraction pocket also, in which the posterior superior part or the attic part of the tympanic membrane is retracted medially and there is formation of a pocket. So initially when the pocket is shallow, it can be cleaned easily, but with time it deepens and it is not easy to clean, and then it requires surgical intervention. Or sometimes a frank cholesteatoma can be seen, which is seen as pearly white flakes in the attic or the posterior superior region, which can be suctioned out. So on otoscopic examination, we can see this type of picture. For investigations of etiquental disease, again, most important thing is examination under the microscope. Here we see the details. If there is a retraction pocket, we can see whether it is shallow or deep, what is the condition of the ossicles, what is the uh, extent of the disease. So all details can be seen when we examine the patient under microscopic vision. Then tuning fork tests are done, Rinne test, Weber test, and audiogram is also done to know the type and the degree of the hearing loss. Again, first is sent for culture sensitivity examination, and X-ray mastoid, that is Schuller's view, and CT scan of the temporal bone should be done to know the condition of the mastoid hair cells, whether there is any bone destruction or not, what is the condition of the dural plate, and what is the level of the sinus plate. Now, in this etiquental type of disease, generally there is bone destruction because it is a bone destroying property. Now, we saw that the common symptoms of the patients was ear discharge and hearing loss. However, if the patient complains of these additional symptoms, then we should get a suspicion that this patient might be having a complicated CSM. We know that there are two types of complications, extracranial and intracranial complications. So if generally the CSM, the patient does not complain of earache, but if there is pain in the ear, then it can be because of extradural or a brain abscess. Similarly, if there is vertigo, then we can think that the patient might be having an erosion of the lateral semicircular canal in which there is a fistula over the canal. So we should always do a fistula test. Fistula test means on pressing the tragus, there is increased pressure in the external ear which is transmitted to the middle ear, which is transmitted to the inner ear through the fistula. So on pressing the tragus, if the patient gets a vertigo or nystagmus, then we say that fistula test is positive, and it indicates a fistula in the lateral semicircular canal. Then if the patient complains of persistent headache, it can be because of any intracranial complications like brain abscess, meningitis, subdural, extradural abscesses. Similarly, if the patient complains of facial weakness, then the facial canal or the fallopian canal, which goes through the middle ear, it can be eroded because of the disease. And the most common part of the facial canal which is eroded is the horizontal segment of the facial canal. Then if the child is brought by the parents and we on examination we see a listless child refusing to take feed, easily going to sleep, then and also having ear discharge, then we should suspect extradural abscess. Similarly, if there is an intracranial infection, the additional symptoms will be fever, nausea, vomiting. Then because of meningitis, which is one of the intracranial complications, we can have meningeal signs like irritability, neck rigidity, and if the patient is having any infection in the petrous part of the temporal bone, that is petrositis, then it manifests as Gradenigo syndrome, in which there will be diplopia because of the palsy of the sixth cranial nerve, which supplies the lateral rectus muscle. And if this patient is having any gait problem like ataxia, then we should suspect any cerebellar abscess. So if the presence of these additional signs and symptoms should always suspect us about the presence of any complication. So that will be a complicated CSOM. Now treatment of etiquental type of CSOM. So in tubotympanic we saw that initial treatment was medical management, in which we cleaned the ear, we tried to make the perforation dry, and after that we operated. However, in etiquental type of CSOM, there is not much role of any medical management. And here also the primary aim of the treatment is to remove the disease. But the mainstay of the treatment is surgical. Now, surgical treatment of etiquental type of CSOM can be divided into two categories. One is canal wall up procedure, another is canal wall down procedure. Now, canal wall here means the posterior canal wall. So, during surgery, if we are removing the posterior canal wall such that the middle ear and the mastoid become a single cavity, those procedures are called canal wall down procedures. And if we keep the canal wall intact, so that the middle ear and the mastoid they are still separate cavities, then these are called canal wall up procedures. Now, which procedure to choose depends on many things: the experience of the surgeon, the disease in the patient. So we'll see what are the differences between these two procedures. Now in canal wall up procedure, the size of the external auditory meatus will be normal because here the cavities are still separate. In canal wall down, because we do a meatoplasty, wide meatoplasty, so the meatus becomes large in size, that it is widely open. The canal wall up procedure, it does not require routine cleaning because the cavity size is less. In canal wall down procedure, it requires routine cleaning because there is formation of wax caps, or there is sometimes there can be repeated infection, so it requires regular cleaning. The chances of recurrence or residual disease, they are actually more with canal wall up procedures because here we have kept the canal wall intact, so there are chances that some disease might be left inside. However, when we remove the canal, then the chances of recurrence or residual disease are very less. Then generally a second look surgery is required after 6 months when we are doing the canal wall up procedure. So we explain the patient that after 6 months again we'll have to do the microscopic examination and if required some surgical intervention, but generally it is not required in canal wall down procedures. Then swimming, it is allowed in canal wall up procedure because there is almost a normal anatomy of the ear. But in canal wall down procedure, because the cavity size is more, sometimes swimming activities can be restricted because the water can enter into the cavity and it can cause infection. Then hearing aids are easy to wear because the meatus size is normal in canal wall up procedures. But in canal wall down procedures, if the patient has to wear the hearing aid, then sometimes there is a problem in the fitting because of the large size of the external auditory meatus. The examples of canal wall down procedures, they are aticotomy or radical mastectomy or modified radical mastectomy. And examples of canal wall up procedure can be combined approach tympanoplasty, in which the disease is removed from both sides, that is from the middle ear side and from the antrum side. Now, most commonly in India, we are doing the canal wall down procedures because the compliance of the patients is not that good, and they will not generally come after 6 months for the second look. So here we and in the first sitting only we do the canal wall down procedure, and the most common procedure, a surgical procedure for CSOM of etiquental disease, it is modified radical mastectomy if it is a limited disease. If it is an extensive disease involving the middle ear or the inner ear also, then sometimes radical mastectomy can also be done. So this is the surgical management of etiquental type of chronic suppurative otitis media. Then reconstructive surgery. So after removing the disease, we have to reconstruct the tympanic membrane as well as hearing mechanism. It can be done in the same sitting if we are sure that we have removed all the disease, or sometimes it is done in the second sitting, in which the tympanic membrane can be repaired by myringoplasty, and if ossicle repair is also done, that is by tympanoplasty. Though there is no much role of conservative management in etiquental disease, but sometimes if there is a shallow retraction pocket, then we can ask the patient to come at regular intervals so that that pocket can be cleaned easily and the disease may not progress. So it has to be observed. Or conservative procedure is also sometimes done in individuals who are not fit for surgery. So regular cleaning can be done in such patients. However, there is not much role of conservative management, and surgery is the mainstay of treatment of etiquental type of CSOM. So we saw that there are two types of CSOM. This table summarizes the differences between the two types of CSOM. So based on our clinical examination and history taking, we can get an idea that this patient is having which type of CSOM because the management is different. Now the discharge in case of tubotympanic type of chronic suppurative otitis media, it is profuse, it is mucoid, and it is non-foul smelling. Profuse means on otoscopic examination, it can be seen in the canal, or the patient says that the discharge comes out of the ear canal and it stains the clothes or the bed of the patient. So that is called profuse discharge. However, in etiquental disease, the discharge is scanty, it is purulent, and it is foul smelling. We know why it is foul smelling because of the bony destruction, enzymatic bony destruction. Then perforation in tubotympanic, it is always central. In etiquental, it can be in the etic region, that is pars flaccida, or it can be marginal. Then granulation tissues, they are generally not common seen in tubotympanic type of CSOM, but they are more commonly seen with etiquintal type. Polyps can be seen in both. However, the polyp of tubotympanic type is pale, non-vascular, while in etiquintal it is a red and fleshy polyp. Cholesteatoma, it is always a feature of etiquintal disease, never seen in tubotympanic disease. Complications, they can be seen with both, but they are more common with etiquintal type of CSOM because of the bone destroying property. And hearing loss, which can be seen on the audiogram, it is generally less mild to moderate in tubotympanic type, and it is more severe in etiquintal type of disease, and in etiquintal it can be of mixed type also. So these are the common differences between two types of chronic suppurative otitis media. So thank you very much for your patient listening. And if you have any questions, then you can put it in the chat box. I'll be happy to answer. So thank you very much.